Hi, Badger Ridge parents. This is Mike Murphy, principal at Badger Ridge Middle School. This is a screencast of the parent informational meeting held on February 6th during the evening at the Badger Ridge Step Room. While I will be going through this entire presentation, it also is to note that co-presenters with me were Ann Franke, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Jody Gutman, a continuous improvement team member and sixth grade teacher, Andrea Leibfried, another continuous improvement team teacher and sixth grade teacher, Renee Wetterspoon, who is our curriculum and learning specialist, and Sarah Urban, who is our technology coach. So we're going to go through this. There are really three parts to this presentation. And so our agenda will look as follows. The first part that we'll go through is a data review, really looking closely at and understanding the school report card data and other local data measured here at Badger Ridge. Part two will be the Badger Ridge Middle School Continuous Improvement Team and Plan. And part three will be looking at our Title I programming. So first, looking at the school report card issued by the state of Wisconsin this past November. This report card is a measure of the Wisconsin Forward exam that students took in the spring of the 16-17 school year. And so as you can see, the arrows highlighting, first of all, the overall score was meets few expectations. And then down below that, you can see a breakdown of our demographic areas at Badger Ridge Middle School. We then look to the right in the top upper right hand corner of the school report card, and we see that the report card is broken into four primary areas as far as measuring academic outcome. The first area is student achievement, and you can see there's the school score, and then right next to it is the state score. We then have our school growth score, and in all of these first areas are purely measuring English language arts and mathematics. The third score is a score that is utilized to determine how effective the school is in closing gaps, and that's primarily looking at students that are often land in the category of the achievement, as characterized by the achievement gap. And so are we minimizing that gap between students who aren't necessarily achieving well and students that are achieving at or above the grade level benchmark. And finally, the fourth category is looking at on-track and post-secondary readiness. It measures things like graduation rate. Of course, Badger Ridge Middle School, as a middle school, does not have a graduation rate. That's measured at the high school. However, we are measured in attendance rate, as well as we're measured in 8th grade mathematics achievement. Those are all indicators of students being successful and on track for graduation and college readiness. And then the last box there that we'll look at are also some student engagement indicators. And so what's listed there is looking at an absenteeism rate. So we had no deduction, Badger Ridge had no reduction, and also a dropout rate, which there was no deduction. One thing of note there, last year that included in that was also a test participation rate in which there was a deduction. This year they have eliminated that, and actually last year Badger Ridge, Savannah Oaks, and Verona Area High School all were had a deduction for not having enough students taking the test, and what that resulted in just a -5 score from the overall score. So this year statewide they eliminated that deduction. So when we look at how the score is compiled, and there's a whole manual that describes the algorithms used to create this. But in a nutshell, closing the gaps and on-track readiness account for 25% of the overall score each. And then the student achievement and school growth score accounts for, in a combined factor, 50% of the overall score. But it is weighted based upon more weight may be given to the school growth score for schools that have higher rates of students receiving or who are considered economically disadvantaged. So, as we utilize this report card, this is one measure that we utilize among many. And so our school staff uses this report card to reflect on some of our strengths and also opportunities for improvement in each of the priority areas. Our continuous improvement team, which we'll talk about later, looks at this data and makes judgments about areas of improvement. And so we consider this data and reflect on it and use it to guide our school practices. So the next section that of just things to note about this the school report card is that there also are some things that are possible confounding elements that while we don't have a distinct answer, they're things that should be noted. And the first thing is just that we've had really in the last 5 years, 3 different iterations of the state exam. So that always creates a little bit of variance in scoring, but students statewide encounter that. One of the things, the other thing that as far as comparing scores year to year, because the test changes, as well as because of some of there's changes in the metrics, that it's hard to really kind of compare, for instance, the 15-16 report card with the 16-17 report card. It's difficult to compare the scores longitudinally because of the changes in the tests and the changes in the scoring metrics. And then the last thing that is really pertains to Badger Ridge by itself, and is something of note, is that in 2017, Badger Ridge had the highest number of students whose parent opted them out of taking the test. And so about 8% of our students opted out of taking the test. And what we know demographically as far as the students who did opt out of taking the test, that those are students that often, and looking at their student data, were really pretty high achieving scoring students. So, there were about 8% of students who opted out, and those student scores are not calculated into to our overall score. And so when you think about our overall student achievement score, certainly that could play a potential factor in how the end score was calculated. So just looking at some other data sources that we utilize, the measure of academic progress is our MAP scores that students take 3 times per year last year. This year they'll be having 2 administrations, one in the fall and one in the spring. And so we'll be looking at the 2018 fall MAP scores as well as the 2017 fall to spring MAP scores so that we can kind of see growth in 2017. MAP is one of our more valuable measures because we're able to show longitudinal data over several years. The test and the scoring has stayed relatively constant, and so we're able to kind of look at multiple years of data as well as looking at data within the school year. Then we can really link to individual students over the course of time. So looking at the 2018 MAP scores, these are MAP scores for all students in math and reading. And this is the percentage of students meeting or exceeding benchmark. And so in the fall. And so these tests were given really in September. And so, for instance, you'll look at grade 6. So really an incoming 6th grader, 47% of them met or exceeded the fall benchmark in math. And 61% met or exceeded the fall benchmark in reading. And so you'll note over with the 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, it's important to note with all of these scores that it's difficult to, in this manner, look longitudinally at scores because you really want to measure the same cohorts of kids. So comparing grade 6 and grade 7 and grade 8, the makeup of those classes may be very, very different. Those grade levels may be very different. So then the next thing we look at is then really breaking that data apart. And so here we look at the map scores, fall map scores in demographic areas, specifically in reading. And if we look at across the board at grade 6, 7, and 8 in each of the demographic areas, I think the thing that's most notable there to point out is our white students are achieving at really pretty high rates. But then when we look at our students of color, our English language learners, our students receiving special education services, some scores as far as meeting or exceeding benchmark far below their white classmates. The same pattern really can be said for our MAP scores in math in the fall of 2018. So again, white students far outpacing their grade level classmates. So then we turn to our 16 and 17, so last year's MAP scores, and we look specifically here at growth, where we're able to measure, look at did students, as far as did they meet kind of their growth targets. And so MAP for each student measures or puts forth a projection of what they believe the student should grow, and those growth numbers vary student to student. And so these are the percentage of students who have met or exceeded their projected growth target in the 16-17 school year. And again, we break that down by demographic area, and these are the percent of students, what we're looking at now, percent of the students who did not meet fall benchmark. So these are students that did not meet the benchmark in the fall, and then whether or not those students who did not meet fall benchmark actually then met their growth target, which is our goal, is that we really want, as far as closing the gap, we really want those students, 100% of those students, to meet their goal so that they are on target. So this is a definite area, continues to be an area of growth as far as really making sure that our students who aren't making grade level growth are doing so. And then we see the same data here in reading, and actually really highlighting some numbers here that are really astounding, based on, I think, largely the work we've really been doing in reading, specifically looking at our Black students here. In 6th grade, 71% of them met their growth target. In grade 7, 75% met their growth target. So this concludes our the first part, and probably the lengthiest part of the presentation, which looks into our school data.